So I must start with the beginning. How did you get involved with AirAsia Foundation?
I started it.
You started?
Yes.
You started it?
I started it 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now. We just celebrated our 3rd anniversary.
You might have to move the mic closer.
On March 15, that marks our 3rd year.
Wow.
So when I started in 2012, there was nothing. So it was really from the basic, looking at what kind of areas we want to work on, right down to the really boring things like doing the board papers, registering the company, getting the trustees together, and so on and so forth.
And you did all of that from scratch?
I was the only person, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no way.
We still have only 2 staff now.
Wow.
Yes. So yeah.
Okay, now that changed the set of questions I have for you, because now I've got more questions, right? So you are a social entrepreneur, really?
Well, I wouldn't think so. I mean, well, that was how it all started, because I went to see Tony. I said, Tony, I want to start a social enterprise. He's like, oh, great idea. I love that. But you got to do it as AirAsia. What? But how did that come in? And he said, no, let's do it properly. I always wanted to do this, but I haven't got time, so go set it up. And then we'll figure out how we can help you later. So I kind of got sucked into that, and here I am.
So what were the few first things that you kind of go, holy crap, I don't know what to do?
Well, before I did this, of course, I was working with AirAsia since 2004, and I was 4 years in AirAsia. And that experience really set you up for anything in life, because it was really at a very startup stage, and no one was really there to tell you, you need to do this and you need to do that. So the way he works is that he sets you a task, and you go figure out how to do it. So he'll then come back and ask you questions, and if you can't answer them, sometimes he's nice, sometimes he screws you up. And then you go fix your problem. And after a while, you become really quite resilient. You can do anything you set your mind to. And I didn't think this was really a prohibitive task, So it's really tedious when you have to read through the laws, find the right structure. But it's really reaching out to different people that you know, and really assessing the information that is available to you and making a decision.
So tell me a little bit about AirAsia Foundation. What do you guys focus on, and what do you guys do?
So when we first started, there are a lot of corporation foundations already very, very established with a lot of resources, much more than what we have. My resources are tiny, even compared to yours.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not kidding you. It's a fraction of what you have. And this has always been the way we've done it. I don't think we ever believed in having a lot of money and then, not knowing what to do with it. So even as a foundation, I have to prove what I can do with my funds, even if it's $500,000 or $1 million, before I can justify asking for more. So, so it really, that is how, why we started off really, really small. And when we did it, it was really from ground. We didn't want to already assume some portfolio that was already in existence. A lot of foundations work on education, women, children, and we thought, we're AirAsia, we don't do things like other people. We've got to find something different, something we can make an impact. So we went through all the kind of feedback we received from different parties, different people. Social enterprise was very much something that Tony wanted to do. So that was really a fixed thing. And the reason why we wanted to do that is that when we first started, I joined AirAsia in 2004. We were about 3 years old. It had 15 planes back then, and it has 150 now. So it was really very much still at a very startup stage. And when we did that, nobody believed that it would work, from the very beginning. So the spirit in the company has always been that you got to find a way to survive. So we were fighting against all the national carriers, the government, the regulators, the airports, anybody you can think of. And so we wanted to carry that value across into what we want to do for social change. So Tony has a quote. My comms people don't like that I say this, but he says, I don't believe in charity, but I believe in helping people who want to help themselves. So that is kind of the guiding principle of what we do. Having said that, of course, charity is absolutely necessary, and he has been the first person to have called for us to carry out the fundraising campaigns that we did in the last 2 years. The first one for Typhoon Haiyan, where we raised $2 million in a month. And earlier this year, we raised 900,000 for Kelantan East Coast floods. So where the situation calls for it, yes, we absolutely would do what we need to do. But as much as possible, we want people to also not expect a handout, but really, do your part as well, and we'll help you along. So that was one area, but we had other areas, but I don't think I'll go into that now. We haven't actually touched into that because we thought, okay, there are areas we want to do, but it's better for us to focus on one, build from ground, build our reputation, build the trust before we move on to other things.
So, so it seems like the foundation itself do really two very big role. One is around the fundraising itself with more topical kind of issues. And then on the other side, you guys also do very strategic kind of investment or funding to social enterprises as well, right?
Sorry, say the second part is
you guys actually
yes.
do provide investment and
yes.
fund. So how do you manage to keep that lean team of 2 people while doing two quite especially fundraising and massively operation kind of tasks?
Well, that was a trick because that wasn't my original job scope. I was supposed to get funds from AirAsia, disperse them to good organizations, and then, as usual, I got tricked, and then, but that fundraising part was actually something that we all really wanted to do because we have a sister airline in the Philippines, and one of the stations that we flew to was in Tacloban, and as all of you know, probably it was completely devastated. We have staff there, almost 29 of them. They were all missing. Only one, the station manager, was in Manila. So he couldn't get back into Manila because everything was gone. So we got him onto the first or the second military transport into Tacloban, and he went to search for the staff. It took him a week before he found all of them.
Wow.
So we had a few people in, and then we went to see. So this is a funny story that he told us. He went to see the head of the airport at the time because it was run by the Air Force. And the Air Force that was running it back then was the American Air Force who came in, who was coordinating the emergency response. And when they got there, and the American guy, sort of, military guy, like, what do you want? And this guy said, look, we want you to clear the runway so that we can bring our planes in, because they had the military planes, which were the Charlie 130s, and those can mostly carry about 100 people, and they were mostly transport carriers. They were carrying things like generators, cars. So we said, we had planes with 180 seats, we can do a lot more for you to bring people out. Then he just went silent for a while, and then he shouted, where were you all this time? So the next thing he did was he got his bulldozers, whatever, he cleared the runway, and we started flying flights. So we actually do 2 weeks of emergency flights. We carried 5,000 people out of Tacloban. And in the meantime, Tony was trying to do what he can to find out what was happening to the staff. And so for the rest of us in KL, he just set in place a train of action. So basically he said, we need to do something. I want to match fund, raise money on all our flights. So it was the first time we mobilized the entire AirAsia Group. So we had donation boxes in all the flights, wherever you fly, in whichever country. And then we had a donation site set up, a website. And then we had boxes placed in airports. And we also enabled something where, when you buy your flights, you can choose your meals and all that.
Yeah.
So you can also choose to make a donation. So we turned all that around in 1 week, and that was crazy. So it was basically barking at people, get the boxes, get this. So nothing, we had nothing, we had to redesign the boxes, we had to get the boxes produced, get them sent to all the stations. So it was quite crazy, but it was kind of a pace of work that we always kind of worked with. And that was just the first part. So when the money started coming in, it was an insane amount. So we had about 300 donation boxes. So they were like this size, because you can't make anything bigger. It didn't fit into the plane, or the plane areas. And every day they came back stuffed full of cash. It was stuffed. I mean, there are people who were giving. We had donations from 270 countries.
Wow.
And they were in all sorts of denominations. They were coins. It was insane. So we had to get people to count the money, because the banks would not take this money. So every evening we had to get AirAsia volunteers, our staff volunteers. There would be like 10, 15 people who would turn up in a room, and we would open the donation boxes, and we have to open them every single day because they were full after every shift. So every day there will be a mountain of cash in the room, and we will sort them out piece by piece according to denominations, currencies, stack them. We have to bundle them.
And they have to count them. And
we took a counting machine from a cashier. We ran them through, bundle them, separate the coins. It was mad, and we turned $1 million in that 1 month, and then we matched $1 million. So yeah, that's the fundraising bit that we did. It was phenomenal for us, even though it was a crazy amount of work. And we don't have dedicated staff. Me and my staff. At that time, I had my other staff went back to AirAsia, so I was one person. And then we had to tap on volunteers, and everybody was basically taking time off work. So we had to do this over the weekends as well. So, but it was phenomenal because, you know, we are an airline. We're not an NGO.
Yeah.
We don't know why people want to give us so much money. We had money from Brazil, Argentina, Belarus. These were all people making donations online. So we really were very impressed and very touched why people would give us that money.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was one of those people who actually gave all the money. So back then I haven't joined MaGIC yet. I haven't returned to the country. I was flying all around the world on my, I was having my quarter life crisis. I was traveling around, and my sister works for AirAsia. So that was not a shameless part, by the way. And so I ended up flying a lot of AirAsia. But what AirAsia did really well was coming out with the story. The story that you guys told, the thing that I found was that it was very extremely authentic. You guys tell things as it is. There was no any kind of, you know, trying to make it sound cool or, you know, sensationalize anything.
Well, we didn't have to because we had 27 staff that we eventually found, and they continued working throughout the period. They lost everything. They lost all their homes. So they were living in a tent. We were sending food to them from Manila every day for a month until some of the places started opening up. It was really people who would do that even though they had lost everything. So for the rest of us sitting in KL, anybody who wasn't doing their part got a big slap from me, basically. So I just didn't put up with that attitude that it's got nothing to do with me. So so it was a great run. Yeah. And we realized that people do trust us to, so it's a lot of responsibility as well, you know, for us to make sure that the money goes to the right place.
Yeah, I think that there's two lessons there I picked up. One is that as a social entrepreneur, you just gotta hustle. When you're gonna do it, you just gotta do it and get your hands down and dirty. And the second lesson really is that sometimes you have, as a social entrepreneur, you have to be impatient. When you see any kind of injustice and when you're faced with any kind of things that are not supposed to be, you just have to say something and you have to do something. You can't just let things go, especially, you know, when we're faced with things like, you know, people saying racist comments or whatsoever, things like that. You just gotta do something. So, in AirAsia Foundation, how do you guys define social enterprise?
It's very really down to the basics. We really are looking for people who are trying to achieve a social goal. And the goal is actually more important to us than the financial bit. So I know that there is a very wide range of definitions on what social enterprise really is. But for us, it has to have a social goal. It has to take the money to regenerate money to fund your operations. We don't really look for your profit, but if you are really able to sustain what you set out to do, just break even, or then we are really quite happy. So we're not really looking, I mean, we are not an investor. So it's a big difference between an impact investor because we don't look for any return. So we're just giving the money to the organization, and the organization's role is to make sure that the money rolls and continues to keep their operations running. Maybe not the whole part of it, but whatever part they commit to when they apply for the grant.
Is there any minimum amount? Like we must fund X% of the operation and stuff?
No, it's we have a very open structure. Because when we first started social enterprise funding, you know, it's a very difficult thing to make a very hard and fast rule, firstly. And secondly, we were very new. We didn't have a huge budget to put out ads all over the place for people to apply. So we started by really looking out for very good organizations that, you know, had a good idea, and we funded those. And then later on, people started applying. So we also made a decision not to have a minimum or a maximum, but really to look at what the organization presents. So it has to be, if you're like a 2-person organization, don't ask me for $100,000, you know, I would throw it into the bin. But it really has to be commensurate to the size of your organization, your resources, what you had done in the past. Generally, we look for organizations that at least have a 2-year record, track record, maybe not as a social entrepreneur, but if you're an NGO, at least you have done 2 years in that field, so that when it comes across very easily the moment you ask a question. I used to be a journalist, so I ask good questions. Then you can immediately tell whether this person genuinely knows the subject or not.
And what are some of the examples of these organizations that you guys have funded, and what are the success stories as well?
So I will tell you about the one that I'm going to attend on Sunday. So this organization is a group of architects. They are in this place called Yogyakarta. Now, a lot of social enterprises, I know a lot of you live in urban areas and you have access to English language media, and you know a lot of channels for funding are available if you can fill in a form in English or BM. But a lot of social enterprises that we work with don't actually have people who speak English. So in Indonesia, the group that we work with, they speak in Bahasa Indonesia, so I go there and I have to speak in Indonesian. I have projects with a Thai farmer who speaks no English, so I have a partner who works with us. So these are the ones we really try to reach. They have fantastic projects, it's just that, you know, they're working on their projects. They may not be, you know, in an urban area, so we try to reach those. So this particular one comes from a group of young architects. They call themselves community architects. So basically, they're all trained architects, but their vision is to bring back the uniqueness of Indonesian traditional culture, architecture into everyday life. Now, Indonesia is a place, as you know, which is on the seismic zones. So they face volcanic, this project is in Yogyakarta, so it has Merapi, which is one of the most active volcanoes. They have earthquakes, they have all sorts of other things, you know, like mudslides. And this group started by looking at why in the past people could live with these disasters, and we are so bad at coping with them now. So the first project they started working on disaster relief, so they did work in Aceh, and the first project they took me to see was on the slopes of Merapi. So Merapi had just exploded, and then a few months later we went back, and I went up, they took me to the highest village on the slopes of Merapi, and you go up there, it's beautiful, it's incredibly windy, and you look out, you are completely overwhelmed. There is a huge river, and it's completely filled with mud, dust. And so this river is like this big. The giant earth mover would be this size on it. And on the slopes was completely gray because it was just volcanic ash. So the government actually had made a decision like no one can live on the slopes anymore. Everybody had to be relocated to the city, and which is, as you know, is already extremely congested. So the government had that, but the villagers refused to move. They wanted to move back, and their reason is this is a cycle of life. We don't see this as a tragedy or death. It's always been a part of us, and we have been able to cope with it because they used to have early warning mechanisms. So on the slope of Merapi, they used to have bamboo. So when the lava came down, they used to hear cracking sounds, but because of all the deforestation, it's all gone.
Wow.
Right? So they're trying to reintroduce all these sort of values into architecture. So then I love their work, but I said, look guys, this is not a social enterprise. You've got to come up with something if you want me to fund you. So they said, okay, we have something that we want to do, but we didn't have funding, so this might work. So their idea is to work on a heritage conservation project. So how many of you know Indonesian history? Anybody from, do you know the Mataram Sultanate? Well, then he doesn't know. Yeah, well, it is in Java. So the Mataram Sultanate is a 16th century sultanate. It's the first Islamic sultanate in Java. So this sultanate really is the forefather of today's Sultanate of Jogja and Sultanate of Solo. So these are very, very old areas it is so rich in Indonesian culture. In Japanese culture, you go there, you can immediately feel it. So this old city had a capital. The first capital is this place called Kota Gede. And Kota Gede today is a village, but it has one of the highest concentration of traditional Javanese structures in one village. So they had these Joglo houses, the old mosque, the courtyards, but 75 to 80% damaged by the earthquake, and they had no money to restore it. Government has no money, and the people have no money. So they came to us and said, look, can we work on social enterprise where we can raise awareness to conservation, but at the same time be able to engage the locals, so that, because this area is very famous, right? So a lot of people go there. Another thing they're really famous for is silversmithing. So these silversmiths who work there are generational silversmiths. They have 500 years of history. And they learn it from their father, their grandfather, and so on and so forth. And it all goes back 500 years to the Sultanate, because all these guys used to, and still do, make the ceremonial wear for the palace. So they said, okay, we need to bring people into this village. What happens now is the tour buses will come, they will go to the main street. People will buy the rubbish from the main street, and then they'll go. So we said, okay, what do you want to do? So they came up with this project scope. So they started by mapping the entire old city. Now, they started by engaging youth volunteers. So they got people who live in the villages. These kids went around, because it's like an old city, so it's like a labyrinth of streets. So the kids will go into all the little streets, talk to every single family, gather all the data. So now they have an architectural and demographically correct map of every household in that village, right? So it's...
Sharifa.
Yeah, I think it's working. So from that, they develop walking tours. So they have walking tours to bring people to look at the architectural features of this area, walking tours to look at the traditional culinary in this food areas, and then they have the silversmith thing as well. So that was the first thing. And then from this mapping exercise, we were supposed to identify an old house where we will fund the restoration, and they will use that as the center for their heritage walks. The second thing that's going to be launched this Sunday. The second thing that came out of this mapping was that we found out that this whole area, which used to have silversmith, this is a place with about 200 households. All these households used to be involved in the silver trade, and they used to supply all the things that you used to buy in Bali. And then the Bali bombing happened, and the entire industry was decimated. So there are now about only 25 of them left who are still doing it. They make less money than a parking attendant. So that's what they have to do. So these silversmiths found out about this project, and they said to our guys, they said, look, we need help. They realized that, see, this is the difference between them and a lot of artisans. These guys came to us, we didn't go to them. They came to us and they said, we need help. We realized that we have skills, but we have no design capability. So you go in there, you buy something there, it will look like some old-fashioned silver product you can get in any place. So what they did was, so we worked with the British Council. British Council just came to us and they said, look, we like what you're doing. Sorry, I got distracted. So British Council came along and said, look, we like what we're doing, is there something we could do together? So we said, British Council, great. We need technical expertise from the UK. So maybe I should forget about this.
Can you guys hear us?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear us at the back? Chai-Ling, can you hear? Yeah? Cool.
Okay, so anyway, I hope I'm not boring you with this story, but then British Council came up with the most amazing imaginable thing. They got the 2 jewellery program directors from Central St. Martin in London to come to Jogja. So we had a week-long workshop. They taught them design processes, and from that we produced a collection of silver charms, and we're going to sell them on AirAsia from June. So yeah, so the idea is this. Is that it's not really just so much about the money, but we try to find what are the partners that we have, and also try to give them access to things like the publicity that we can get, and they probably no one would know about them, and also the channels that we have selling on board, for example.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest, the main point of difference and the biggest leverage that AirAsia Foundation has, which is the market as well. Because one of the biggest things that we have challenges over when engaging with rural social entrepreneurs is we can train them and so on and so forth, we can fund them, but it's the access to market that we just do not have access to, nor can we do that from our part as a government agency. So how did you guys find this social entrepreneurs or social enterprises?
Oh, through people who know people who know people. Actually, I found them through because I had a friend who was working with Think City, and Think City was funding a fantastic project on Armenian Street. So Armenian Street has all these beautiful old buildings, and they all used to be rent control. So all the families used to live there. Now suddenly it's not rent control anymore, and all the people want to sell off as quickly as possible and make it into a coffee house or a boutique hotel. So all these tradesmen and families who have lived there for generations are being chased out. So this one strip, which is on Armenian Street, is owned by a temple. So the temples that we are okay to give them rent, the same rent for the next 10 years in return for the investment to fix up the place. So Think City gave the investment to fix up the place.
Right.
And then they have rent security, and each of the families have to take up small loans to fix up the inside of the house. So it was kind of like a
win-win situation.
Yeah. And so the lady who was running this lady called Ng Hui Sim, she was a landscape architect before, so she introduced me to these guys.
So there's a question that says, what is the reason behind for you to start the foundation?
We were, AirAsia has been a company that has, shaped very much a part of my career. And around the time when we were, then I left after 4 years. I did my master's, I did some other things. And then when I met Tony again was about 2012, AirAsia was celebrating its 10-year anniversary. We thought, look, it's 10 years, we haven't actually done anything significant in terms of, the social part. Yes, we've been giving sponsorships. Everybody's writing to us for free flights, and how many free flights we can give, Yes, we'd like to be able to help, but it doesn't actually create the impact that we want. So we thought, let's pool everybody's resources and do something that is meaningful. And so with a foundation that is set up separately, we can actually focus, and it doesn't become like an afterthought for the communications department or marketing department.
So people writing to you guys asking for sponsorship of flights is probably the most common thing that happened. What are some of the more common, things that come through AirAsia Foundation?
Well, surprisingly, even though we have a form that talks about social enterprise, people still write to us for scholarships, event, I like to go for this event, I like to be a youth participant in this, give me a flight, I want to be a pilot, give me a scholarship, So those are still, the ones that come in, even though there is a form. They will somehow manage to put what they want to say in that form. Which is a waste of everybody's time because, it doesn't fit my criteria, but it's a waste of their time to do that. But I think people, maybe they really need funding and they just want to try it.
So there's a question here from the crowd. What is AirAsia's foundation's scope of impact?
Sorry, scope of impact, what does that mean?
So do you have a focus area?
No, we actually, when we started out, because it was so new, we just sort of kept it very open. But more or less now, it sort of shapes into two directions. The first one is one on what we call the ethical goods, or good goods. So it will be things that are produced by communities that are working with the poor or artisans. So you probably know about Rags to Riches. I have my Rags to Riches back there. So Rags to Riches is one example of an organization in the Philippines that works with very poor people who used to live in the garbage dump site in Manila, and they work with them to weave these beautiful bags designed by Filipino designers, and they help them earn a much better income. But it's not so much about just the income, because her work also involves a lot of other things like life skills, how to be more confident, how to manage your finances, how to have better nutrition for your children, yada yada, etc. So that's one. And then the other project that we're working on in Thailand is actually, I can go on forever, but I'll just make it short, but it's a coffee project. So it used to be a hill tribe, and this whole area used to be opium, and then they converted to corn. Which
is this Doi Chang?
No, though this is, I would never fund that because they're so big, they don't need my funding. This is called Musa, it's called Musa Coffee Hill. Musa is a tribe, it's in western Burma, near the borders with, western Thailand, near the border with Burma. So after the whole opium thing, they converted, the government got a lot of people to convert to corn. But this guy is a community leader, and he said corn is not going to do anything for us because you basically have to deforest the entire place, plant your corn, and then buy the pesticides. And then next year you have to buy your GM seeds again and plant again. So all the farmers there, a lot of them are indebted. So he decided that what's important to hill tribe is always the land. and the forest. So he reforested the area and he found crops that he can grow within the forest cover. So one of these things is this thing called shade-grown coffee. So shade-grown coffee is basically grown under a canopy of trees. So it's completely consistent with reforestation. And this area is now declared a national park, and although in many areas hill tribes are being evicted, they have worked out a sort of understanding with the government that they stay there. They are part of the solution and not the problem. So that's interesting because we're also going to start to sell their coffee on board in Thailand.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So I met Reese when I was still in Australia, and we flew her over to talk to us. I think, her energy is very, very infectious. And I think that.
But she's done a very big job. But there are many, many smaller ones that do with other less high-profile products. So that's one. The second one that we actually work on is more that we now focus on is more to do with community tourism, similar to what I spoke with in Jogja. So there are other projects that work on giving. So it's actually linked back to the sustainability of the AirAsia business model as well. We bring everybody to fly around the places, and many of you probably have taken many AirAsia flights to Bali gazillion times, Phuket a million times. But how many times can you go to these places without getting bored? How many times can you go to the Angkor Wat? How many times can you go to the Borobudur? I'm not a temple person. Once is enough. So I like to do something that's different, but more importantly, something that doesn't cause a negative impact. So by going to, say, you're walking to a Jogja, you not only know about the place, but also you actually engage the locals into the tourism trade without causing a big impact on their lifestyle.
Yeah. So this ties into a question from the crowd and related to me because I'm from Sarawak. With limited resources, what is the efficient way to boost up Sarawak's tourism and organic product to increase native income? Because you're the expert now, right?
Oh, I'm definitely not expert, but I'm not a social entrepreneur. This is for the social entrepreneur to figure out. Miss Sarawak has got fantastic resources. I've got friends who come here and want to buy food products, so they ask me, like, what's great in Malaysia? I say, Sarawak pepper. Then we go to the shop, they are so freaking ugly. You look at the packaging, it's ugly.
Yes, true, actually. Just so you know, I love Sarawak pepper so much that I brought Sarawak pepper to UK. When I was living
I love it, but really, if you go to Singapore airport, you look at the products that they have, it's beautifully packaged, it's like Singapore this, Singapore that, but Singapore doesn't produce anything. So they're getting it from somewhere, but they know the value of branding and marketing and packaging. And that's what a lot of the people who work in agriculture, they're very passionate about their product, but they don't know how to present it, and that's where we also come in. So like the guy who works in Bangkok, he's got this wonderful coffee, I love it, that's the only thing I drink now, but it comes with this really awful packaging. So that's one thing we're trying to change. It doesn't actually alter the value of the product, but that's the way the consumer society is. And if you want to be part of this, you have to play that game. So you have to find the people to help you to design right, package it right. It doesn't have to be a high-cost operation. There are lots of very talented design students in Malaysia. Work with them. We did our first video with a very young group of filmmakers. They made a fantastic video, better than anything we can get from like the big agencies. So that's one thing that you definitely have to look at. That's for one side. But the other side, actually, coming from AirAsia as a low-cost carrier, a lot of things boils down to cost. And you were surprised that there are only two of us. Why do I need more if I can do it with the two of us? A lot of times, I still have a lot of time in my hands. So I'm really wondering, what do all the people with a team of 10 people do? So that's something you need to think about, I guess, right?
Absolutely. I think that's a good reality for a lot of the social enterprises and also charities especially, because as they grow, there's this big assumption that as they get more fund, they have to increase the operation. To increase operation, they have to increase the people. Instead of trying to think about how can we reduce cost benefit or reduce cost but increase benefit, which is what business principles usually.
Working with NGOs was definitely challenging because they're not used to thinking like a business. So they actually come to me like, I'm doing this for my social cause, so you gotta give me the money. So I'm sorry, the world has changed. No one's going to just give you a pile of money and not ask you for even a budget, or that's how it was. I've actually seen some people's budget, and it's kind of something that a 15-year-old child would do, but they never actually had to be accountable. So one of the projects that I worked with, the first one that we worked with, they were very shocked because we asked them to come up with a budget. We say in our agreement, this is what you're supposed to do. If you move away from this in any way, you have to let us know. There's accountability. You have to give us a quarterly report. And so they didn't. They used the money for something else. And so I didn't pay them the next time. They're like, where's my money? So, well, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. You used it for something else, so I'm not going to give it to you. And you didn't give me a report. So they said, oh, no one has ever done that. You committed this money. I said, well, I'm not a charity. I don't fund charities. So you have to keep your word. As an NGO, yes, we all believe in a social cause, but there is also something called responsibility, governance, and as much as possible, I mean, NGOs, even Greenpeace, all these big ones, they are not immune from misusing funds as well.
Yeah,
so everybody needs to be accountable, whether you're NGO or you're a business.
I like that. I also say that I work for a venture fund, and I say that there's nothing scarier than being faced with an impact investor.
Yeah.
And then you have an impact investor and a journalist. I don't know what's scarier than that now.
Well, I'm not an impact investor, so I'm not as
you,
bad.
But you have the money. So what's the social entrepreneurship scene like in Malaysia?
Well, I work in a region, and I think Malaysia is one of the weaker countries. Weaker countries in terms of where social enterprise development is. They are the one country where I think I mentioned to you a bit earlier that has done a lot of work in the last 3 years is Thailand. And there's an organization called Change Fusion that is like MaGIC, and they have done. I mean, it's a very nice executive director. He looks like the cat in Totoro. He's really into this Studio Ghibli thing, and he writes things like listening to Debussy is like dancing on photon waves, So this guy, he has, in his very quiet way, started, with something like an accelerator program, small amount of funding, 10,000 ringgit, 15,000 ringgit, and he nurtured a whole range of businesses, a lot of them to do with agriculture, some with community tourism, and then he also worked with the government. So he actually got a Thai social enterprise office set up with the Thai Prime Minister's office. And then he also started working with the Thai Stock Exchange. The Stock Exchange starts to set up something called, he just set up something called Be Kind Fund. So basically it's for investors to invest in companies that have this sort of social sustainability. So that is actually with the Thai Stock Exchange now. So the Thai Stock Exchange is eventually going to come up with a measure where it will publish a measure on there will be a measure on how much each company invests into social projects. So that's going to be a measure, like official measure for listed companies.
So maybe you should start the conversation in Bursa, Malaysia.
Well, that's for you to do. Right? But I mean, this is really great stuff that he has done. Another country that's very good is Vietnam. And this lady, she's our trustee, her name is Wan. She started this organization called CSIP, Center for Social Initiatives Promotion. It sounds like a government outfit, but it really isn't. It's run by 7 women and 1 guy. And they have been working on social enterprise for 8 years, well before this whole term became really hip and happening. So now they have got a whole range of social enterprises as well, which is great for us because when we come in, we don't have the kind of resources. I mean, you have public funding, so these are organizations with public funding, and then you need to do that to nurture the ones there. And that's when we come in, and then they will introduce us. Okay, I've been training this one for 2 years. They are ready. Can you have a look? So they present the proposals to us, and whatever we like, we take it on. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what are some of the key challenges and key opportunities for social entrepreneurship in Malaysia that you think we're either missing or we're not capitalizing on?
Malaysia is...
I might drop this actually.
Yeah, Malaysia is in a kind of very strange limbo situation. We are quite much better off than these countries. So firstly, when you have something like a project like Rags to Riches, it couldn't work in Malaysia because you don't have that level of poverty that can support an organization like that. It's hard. It's hard to come up with something like that. So you need to work a lot harder to convince people. Secondly, we also have a handout culture. Right? Welfare ministry will come and give you this, and then you tell the artisan, can you do this? Tak payahlah. That it really is a lot of the times the attitude, like they don't want to change. They're very resistant to change because they know that at the end of the day there will be some, sort of safety net that they will have. That's one challenge. The second challenge is a lot of people here are very used to big numbers. So when I say like, oh, my smallest project is 10,000, 15,000 US dollars, they're like, huh? So they will be sending me proposals for minimum 100,000. I've got proposals for 1.5 million, but with no real results. So it'll be like a documentation project that I want to do, give me 1.5 million. So it's a bit of divorce from reality. But I don't know whether it's because that's the way the grants are set up in this country. So, when the government announces a grant, it's always like 100 million, 200 million, and we don't really know who gets the 200 million. But when actually most of the organizations that we're funding need really a little bit of money. So, so I think those are the challenges that are faced in Malaysia. So we have Tony Bong that we are funding in Malaysia, and there's another one really exciting one that we are evaluating right now, and two actually we are evaluating, but these are small amounts. But these are guys who could never qualify for a government grant.
Yeah. So there is another question from the crowd, which is, how do we build trust with the people we work with?
Oh, firstly, you can't come in and stick your nose into
people's business.
Their business and expect them to just change. So for me, I don't actually deal directly with I don't run direct projects, so it's usually with a group. But the groups that we select also are groups that already have a very strong community organizing capability. Like Tony Bong has been doing this for 20 years. Our ARCOM guys actually have 2 full-time community organizers, because the communities that you work with tend to be very wary. They probably had a lot of people come in and promise all sorts of things. And the last thing you want to do, especially when it comes to these communities, is to come in and disrupt the community structure. Especially for Orang Asli villages, for example. If you deal with Tony Bong, I don't come in and say, hey, I want this village to get this and this village to get that. I don't interfere. So basically he chooses based on, he would tell me, okay, I'm picking these villages because these guys are for this reason, and if the reasons make sense, I leave it to them. I don't tell them like, oh, I don't want this village, I want that village. Yeah. So when I do that, when I do funding, that's actually something very important. And I think it's kind of tempting for us to come in to say like, oh, I know better, I can do this better for you, but you may end up causing so much discord that you can't move on.
Yeah. I think that's also one of the big challenge at MaGIC, because we get a lot of applications for funding as well, because we do provide funding. In fact, Ravi over there received some funding for us for his project Try for Marble. The 2 things that you just mentioned are the things that we come across all the time. People either really put up their numbers, so you get applications, even if though it's for 100,000 ringgit grant, people put it up to 2 million, 5 million. I think the maximum we've seen is 2-point-something million. And you just go, how are we going to fund this? Like, we made it very clear that it's a conditional grant, it's 150,000 ringgit, and it's tied to your milestone. So make it all very clear, and only then we disperse fund. That's one big issue. And then I forgot the second issue that you mentioned, I was going to mention about as well.
Community organizing, disrupting of social structures.
People think that they have the right answer.
Right.
So they go into communities and say, I want to help the homeless community because they need this and they need that.
Right. What was that funny thing that they gave the homeless people? What? Rice cookers and things like that?
I don't know that one. I haven't come across that one yet. But I did get a phone call from someone who say, I know what it's like, and I was like, how do you know what it's like? And
so we never assume that we know it. I mean, we are fortunate living in an urban area, but you never come in sort of with a pity, like I pity. Another thing I didn't like also, I mean, I would say that as Malaysian, I think we need humility as well. We can't go to the region and say, oh, these are like people who live in a kampung in Indonesia, they don't know what they're doing. Wrong. They are actually very, very good. They have a lot of traditional knowledge, inherited knowledge that we have lost. So I think we need to, review, open our eyes, and try to, think about why people did things the way they did. Why did they build their houses the way they did? And that's at the basis of what ARCOM Jogja is doing.
I've got time for only 3 more questions, so I'm going to keep it short. Are you looking at only scalable social enterprise, or is everything focused on small QED projects?
I don't know, that's kind of a vague question. Yes, we of course want it to be scalable, obviously, but I'm not sure. I mean, I can't really say offhand. It really depends on what kind of scale? If you are the size of, say, a Burger Lab now and you want to grow to 5 Burger Labs, probably not, because I think Burger Lab can fund itself. You know, I can't really say offhand. You probably should, you know, look at the form, send in an application, and then you will hear from me.
Or not.
Or not. Yeah.
Any moments in your job so far that you just go, you know, like that aha, or that this job is...
Oh, too many. I remember when I was in Thailand and I was doing this coffee project and I was standing on top of the hill and I looked down and half the hill was bare and then the other half was full of these little trees, these trees that this guy was doing, and I just felt at that moment I had the best job in the world, because here am I drinking coffee, you know, walking around the highlands, and all these people are churning numbers back in the office, you know. So I mean, those are great. And then the other one was, this is actually a very special moment. So when we did the silversmith workshop, we had, I mean, this is interesting because the community there, the silversmiths there, were a range of age. The youngest guy was like 22 and the oldest guy was 60. So this oldest guy used to be a master, he's a master craftsman, and he used to run a workshop with like 19 people in Bali. And so when we had the workshop, these old guys came along. So they were the really skeptical ones, you know, they folded their hands. And we called them the refuseniks because they refused to do anything. But they wanted to be there because they didn't want to lose it, they wanted to sort of see what we were up to. So we had Simon who was our Central St. Martin guy. And so Simon would put them through processes that they never ever thought about. So these guys, because they're so skilled, they don't need to draw. You print out anything you want from Bulgari, Cartier, whatever, you bring it to them, they produce an exact replica for you. They have a 3D vision, and they don't have fancy tools, you know. So I went to see the guy who was making a plate, you know, those Langwa flat plates that people like. And he was scraping it with a chisel. Just scraping it, and he can make it completely flat. He didn't have like roller machines, whatever. So he was doing that. So anyway, so he was like, we asked them to, you know, draw. They were like, But by the end of the workshop, after they had gone through everything, these old guys came up to us and they said, thank you very, very much, because this is something that no one has ever done for us. The government has never done for us, and you people have really changed things for us. And so that was very touching. Yeah, and so to change, thank you. So it's actually to change the mindset that is the most important. So whether or not eventually they adopt the process, it's going to be a long time because we only had 1 week with them. But to get them to realize that was quite touching.
Yeah, I think the other thing that is very clear as well is that you don't just give money, you get very personal as well. You actually want to make sure that they not only get the fund, but you know, you're able to provide as much value as you can to make sure that they're successful.
Yes, because a lot of things that we did actually is a lot of capacity building. So next week I'm going there and we're going to unveil this fancy new branding we've done for them with our branding team. So it's really exciting, you know, new packaging, because these guys have no packaging. They just like, this is how it works. You want to get something done, you bring them a bulk of silver, like, buat ni, with a picture, and he'll do it, and he'll give it to you. So now we're actually going to do design, you know, brand identity, all these really alien concepts. And we're also going to help them in pricing. Because the pricing before is like, So they always never take into account their time. They don't take into account how much it costs their electricity, So I actually worked out a model, a very simple pricing model, and I have to go and train them how to use the pricing model. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah.
So, because it's called Wise Words With, any wise words for budding social entrepreneurs?
Oh, okay. I don't know.
You're very honest, so that's good.
Yeah, you don't really need a lot of money to do something, you know, if you have a lot of passion behind it. I think if you actually always enjoy what you do, you will always do it well. I've changed careers many times, and I've been a journalist. I've been the last job I had at AirAsia, I was a strategic planner. I used to plan the fleet, the route, so the plane from the moment it leaves the factory right down to what time it flies and where it flies. I used to decide that. And then I decided that was boring, and then I did something else. I worked in the Ministry of Trade, and then I decided to do this. But every time I did it because I wanted to do it, not because I did it for money or for any other reason like that. And I've always done well. But my friends always say, oh, what kind of career is that? You don't have a career path. But I'm enjoying myself. So, yeah. So I think that's my wise words, do what you enjoy, money will come later. Maybe not, but you will still love your life.
Yeah. Mun Ching, everyone.